All right, guys, I have a special treat for you today. I have a vintage Rolex. I know a lot of people love these things. I like what they represent. I personally don't really care to own vintage watches, but I still like to check them out and share them with you guys. So I was given the opportunity recently by my wife's uncle, who is, in his senior years. I think he's 83 years old. This was his only watch for 34 years. He bought this brand new, 1988. I think he was about 49 years old. So I'm doing the math on all this, and I think I got it all figured out. He kept all the parts and everything. I think he sent this in. Well, I only have record of once, but I think he said he sent it in twice for some service. And the last time was in 2015, and here's what they did. Service the movement. He declined to have the case refinished. You'll see that clearly when I show it to you. New sapphire crystal, the winding crown, and full hand set. And that total was $1,000. That was back in 2015. So let's check out the watch. It still has all the case and everything. It actually even comes with this, the little pamphlet that came with it. He still has all that. So it's really cool. Here it is. It is the 16233, and then on the case it actually says another 3 at the end. So I don't know if that signified the white dial or the Jubilee. I'm not really sure what it stands for. You guys that really know your Rolex will be able to educate me on that. But essentially it's a 16233. Movement inside is a 3135 automatic movement. It is a 36 millimeter DateJust. Two-tone yellow gold with the Jubilee, with a ton of stretch on this. Keep in mind, this was Uncle Larry's only watch for 34 years. And get this, he was he owned his own construction house building construction company up in northern Michigan, and he built a lot of houses like around lakes and everything, so a little bit higher end homes. And he wore this up until, I think from the time he bought it to the time that he actually technically retired was only like a few years that he wore it in the construction trade. And he was a hands-on general. So like he did swing the hammer occasionally, but he was doing a lot of the logistics and paperwork and working with the customers as well. So I wanted to point this out. 36 millimeter with pretty much all of Rolex cases isn't really 36. It's more of like 35 and a half on this guy. This is a Holes case. This is a model that came out in 1988. It is about 42 and a half lug to lug. And then the thickness is just under 12 millimeter. And then you have 20 millimeter lug width. So they were pretty small, but this was like a standard size watch, for like a dressy or luxury watch for the longest time. 36 mil for a man with, especially a Rolex DateJust two-tone, that was normal. It's only more recently, probably once you get into the early to mid 2000s, where you started to see the larger sizes for the men. So, but check out the stretch on this bracelet. And the reason that happens, as you can clearly see, the center links, which are 18 karat gold, are hollow. Well, gold is more flexible, not as strong as steel. So over time of wearing it, the weight of the watch just kind of opened those up a little bit. It has a bunch of micro adjusts there. Very simple clasp. Works fine. No problems. You never lost the watch or anything. Sterile case back. Yellow gold signed crown. And that beautiful white dial. Let's zoom in. I threw this on a time grapher. I'm not going to include time graph video, but I threw in the time grapher. Keep in mind, the last service was 2015, and they did a movement overhaul, essentially. I don't know that they necessarily replace parts. They fully disassemble it and reassemble it and inspect everything and re-oil it and then regulate it, but it's running right now at about plus 8 seconds. So very clean still, crystal and dial. The rest of the watch, yes, clean, sure, but scratched and dented and dinged and stuff. Yeah, he legit wore this watch. It was his only watch, guys. And even when he retired, like most of us guys, we end up working harder after we retire, and he's no exception. I know he did some landscaping. He contracted his own house that he built down in Florida. He still kept working, probably even harder than he did before when he was doing a lot of the contracting out of things. He was probably even more hands-on after he retired. So, and I don't know, judging by the looks of this, I don't know that he actually took the watch off during those activities. I think he kept the watch on his wrist, judging by the overall look of this. Now, this can be completely overhauled if somebody wanted to do it. They, laser weld all the dings and everything and smooth it all out. They can make this case look brand new. They'll even go through the trouble of taking this bezel off and installing a new gold bezel. I mean, you could make this watch look brand new again if you wanted to, but I think there's a host of people out there that would rather have their vintage Rolex watches look like this because they tell a story. It might not be your story necessarily, but it tells a story of that these are purpose-built watches that will stand the test of time. They are timeless. And when you put in perspective that Larry had this on his wrist for 34 years with only one service that I have record of $1,000, did he get his money's worth? Yeah, I'm thinking so. Because retail price on this back in 1988 when it came out, as best I can tell, was $3,550. Well, I mean, you can pretty much sell these now for that easily. So yes, there's appreciation on the, on that money, because $3,550, the value of the dollar, if that makes sense, it's a lot more money now. But it's money spent. Plus, he had the item and he wore it, and then you can get all of that money back essentially later on in life if you decide to sell it or if you pass it on to a loved one. It's a really cool idea. It's a really cool, and you can do it with any watch. It doesn't have to be Rolex. It seems like I'm noticing that it happens more with a luxury watch versus like say a Seiko. It does happen with like a Seiko and some other brand watches where it'll be like their one watch and they'll wear it and they'll get it fixed and everything and then they'll pass it on. It certainly does happen. In the same thing actually happens too. Like you could have bought a Seiko watch back in the 80s and only paid like $100 for it. And today, if it's depending on the model, it might be worth way more than that. Essentially, it's just smaller numbers, same percentages. It gets complicated. I'm babbling. I mostly wanted to focus on the fact that I think it's very romantic. It's very cool that this was his only watch for 34 years. I'm pretty sure his wife bought it for him for their 25th wedding anniversary. So he declined to have. I can't imagine what the bracelet service even in 2015. Because I think they replaced the bracelet. They gave him. It doesn't show how much it would have been on the paperwork, but I'm guessing it would have been a lot of money. That's probably why I declined it. And a lot of people probably declined it. They're like, I'm not paying that much. I only paid this much for the watch, to get a new bracelet. So I don't know what the scenario is now with these bracelets. You guys could probably fill me in. I haven't done the research on it regarding. I'm sure there's maybe some people out there that can rebuild them or to replace them, how much that cost, or if there's just an alternative that looks similar but maybe isn't real yellow gold but is going to be more hardy. Typically when I see these watches nowadays on YouTube videos or on pictures and stuff like that, guys will put them on like leather straps or something like that instead of having them on a bracelet. And I'm sure this is why. It feels great on Jubilee. It's very comfortable. But also, I wanted to point out real quick before I let you guys go. If you see down here on the bottom, it says T Swiss made T. So those T, this is a what they call a tritium dial. So the earlier DateJust, this model, the 16233, when it came out in 88, I think it was like at least for a couple of years they did that, and that's the tritium dial, meaning that the lume, which is just barely on the tips of the indexes, it's kind of hard to see. That's actually tritium lume, and then also in the hands. Later on, they switched over their lume compounds, and then it'll be indicated on the dial. They'll drop the T. That T was for tritium. I love that white dial. There was a bunch of different dial colors you could get with this too. Black, white, champagne were probably the three most common. Then they had like mother of pearl. They even had some where it said like Rolex printed all over it. I'm sure they had some other colors. And then, they had diamond ones as well. But I really like this white one, mostly because for a smaller watch, I would have to almost go with a white dial because the white dial makes the watch like look larger on wrist. But other than that, I think that most of the dials look pretty good. I'm digging the white though for sure. I don't know that there is any lume. Yeah, there might be a little bit of lume on this. I doubt it's going to show up very good. I can try. I don't think it's going to show up very good though. Yeah, it's on the hands. That's about it. Which the handset was replaced, so the handset's not going to have tritium in it. Actually, that's the phosphorus lume or whatever. So, because those were replaced in 2015, so there'll be no lume on the dial. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next video.